Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have a full review of the Honor Magic V2, the most recent foldable from this manufacturer. Let's get started. This device is part of the high-end, and obviously when talking about a foldable, we are talking about an expensive device. In this case, honestly, I consider that it arrived a little late to the global market, so in some aspects it feels a bit out of step with what we have today. To give you an example, it has the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 instead of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 that all flagships should have this year. However, remember that this device had its launch in China and took a long time to reach the global market, so I insist that in some aspects it feels outdated. But it is still a high-end device that offers very good features, and above all, in many ways, it breaks the barrier between a traditional device and a foldable device, and that is what makes it one of the most attractive foldables today. But first, let me tell you about its price. In Mexico, it has been launched in a single edition with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage at a price of 44,999 pesos. That is approximately $2,556 for your reference, although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. Remember that in Mexico, taxes are included. So, with this, it is competing at the top of the segment, even in the most expensive editions of other folding devices. So it is definitely a very expensive device, and based on the price, we are going to demand it. Although Honor includes many things for free when you buy this device, then I think if you consider the whole combo, it becomes a more attractive proposition. For example, they include an Honor Pad 9, the Honor Watch 4, Honor Choice headphones, and screen insurance for 1 month, both for the exterior and interior, plus extended warranty for 1 year. So, I think if you get a pretty premium deal on everything that you get included with the purchase of this device for you to consider, and obviously it can only be purchased through the official Honor online store. Although that in turn could be a difficulty for many people, because buying such an expensive device online, I think it may represent a bit of a risk, especially in Mexico for many people. But now let's dive into everything this device has to offer. Let's start by talking about the design, which is possibly the most attractive section of this device. First, let's take a look at it in this exterior form factor, because it honestly looks like a traditional smartphone. When it's folded, it's not going to look like you're getting a foldable device unless you notice that it looks like you have two devices together. But notice, for example, the reduced bezels that we find on this device, even on the side of the hinge. So, this can definitely be the most attractive thing, because I insist that it gives the impression of being a traditional non-folding device. But in addition to having an attractive design with respect to the use of the front, we will also find a very good level of protection, since in this case it comes with second generation nanocrystal glass, very resistant to falls. We have already tested Honor's nanocrystal glass, and it definitely withstands drops very well, so it doesn't break easily. I honestly do not dare to test the fall because I like this device too much to be throwing it, but believe me, it will have a very good level of resistance, plus it comes with some slightly curved edges to give it a very nice feeling in the hand, although it also brings a factory glued mica that you consider if you are going to leave it glued or not. The truth of the matter is that if you peel it off, you will still have good protection and above all a smoother experience with the hand. On the right side, we have a power button that at the same time is a fingerprint reader and volume buttons. And as you can see, the profile is extremely slim, and this is one of the most attractive things you will find. This edition with synthetic leather back cover has a thickness of 9.9 millimeters. With this, it comes very close to traditional high-end devices, so it honestly feels very good in the hand. On the top, we find infrared and speaker plus a microphone. While on the right area will be present the hinge, which has been manufactured in super lightweight titanium to make this device very comfortable in the hand. In fact, in total, the device has a weight of 231 grams, and this is surprising because usually foldable devices are extremely heavy, but in this case, again, it is very close to what we can find in high-end devices in traditional format. So, as I told you at the beginning, talking about thickness and weight, this device breaks the barrier between foldable devices and traditional devices. There's also a glass back edition that goes up to 10.1 millimeters, but it's still super thin and goes up to 237 grams. So if you want the lighter edition, you should get this edition with synthetic leather. But Let's go on and talk a little bit more about the hinge that I was telling you about, which is made of titanium. It's a super advanced hinge that's going to give you a very good level of resistance and also a very good level of durability. It has passed the test of 400,000 folds and unfold, so you have the durability guaranteed. And with respect to the areas where it can stay folded, you notice that it does have a good level of stiffness. In this case, it seems to have very good opening angles as well. So, I consider it to be a really very well manufactured, very well crafted hinge, and overall a hinge that will be quite lightweight. So the design, as I tell you, is one of the most attractive points of this device, although unfortunately it doesn't include any level of water protection. And that will be its main weak point, especially against its main enemy, the Galaxy Z Fold 5. And by the way, at the bottom is placed the tray where you can put 2 nano SIM cards. In short, it is a device whose design is very attractive because it is very similar to traditional non-folding devices, although it lacks water resistance. The external display will perfectly fulfill what one expects from a device of this price. It is a spectacular screen, compatible with HDR content, which as you can see is able to project some areas of the screen with much more intensity in its brightness. Therefore, it gives a feeling of much more realism when you are watching this type of content. Obviously compatible with various applications. In this case, the screen is 6.43 inches, so it's a very good size as well. The resolution of the screen is 1060 by 2376 pixels. That's a resolution that almost no other manufacturer uses, but overall it gives us a very good level of detail with over 404 pixels per inch, so everything will look considerably sharp. Obviously, we are in front of an OLED panel with LTPO technology, variable from 1 to 120 Hz, with also a very high dimming rate of 3840 Hz, so it is considered to be an extremely comfortable display also to use the device in the evenings without it getting too tiring for your eyes. Regarding the maximum brightness, it offers a peak of 2500 nits when you are viewing HDR content, so it will be in specific areas. For example, this area is giving off a lot more brightness to give this sense of realism, and it's definitely a display that you're going to enjoy because I can't find any complaints. The internal screen allows you a little bit more viewing space than what a traditional smartphone would offer you, although it has black stripes where videos are generally used, although most apps are going to let you resize the video to try to take advantage of all the screen space, although you obviously lose viewing space, so it does offer you more space, although it doesn't end up taking advantage of the entire screen for multimedia content. I think where you're going to take advantage of all this screen space is when you're working, because for example, you could have your video playing over here and you still have a lot more space to keep opening various applications. So it's a very productivity focused device because of all the space that this internal screen gives you. In this case, we're talking about a 7.92 inch size with a resolution of 2156 by 2344 pixels. As I tell you, it's a screen with very square proportions. To be very exact, it's 9.78 to 9 this ratio, and it still gives us a density above 400 pixels per inch, so all text and images will look considerably sharp. It is also an OLED display, also compatible with HDR content and also with LTPO technology, variable from 1 to 120 Hz in its refresh rate. In fact, it also has the same high dimming rate for comfortable indoor viewing. So both the external display and the internal display are of excellent quality. And obviously, it will offer all the tools that you would need, such as dark mode, visual rest modes, or ebook mode that puts everything in grayscale. And in this case, it also offers us 2 different color calibration modes in case you want more intense colors or slightly less saturated colors. You could also set the color temperature more specifically, and both the resolution and refresh rate can be dynamically adapted so as not to consume so much battery, or you can leave it fixed. In this case, it also has video enhancement through artificial intelligence to improve the images of all the content you play, although it will only work in compatible applications. So it has just about everything we could ask for. Note that the lowest brightness is also considerably low, so you're not going to have any detail there, but it doesn't integrate a natural mode option, which is something we do see on other flagship devices, although I haven't seen it present on that many foldables. But that natural tone feature would allow you to try to mimic the white color of the environment directly on your display to have a much more comfortable viewing, especially in warm light or very cool light environments. So there's still a little room for improvement for the display, but honestly, it's spectacular. we will find two speakers, one at the bottom and one at the top. So in this case, when you are using the device in this format, you have stereo sound with good amplitude, and deployed you should also use it in landscape format if you want to still enjoy stereo sound. Although in this case the speakers are located in the same block that has the external display, then it is likely that at the time of playing you end up covering these speakers, but it is solved simply by turning the device, although in this case you are going to stain the camera a little. But this type of inconvenience is present in all foldable devices. It is not exclusive to this device, I just tell you so you know. The speakers offer us an exaggeratedly good quality, the sound is heard with very good definition and a very good presence of bass frequencies. The only disadvantage I see is that it has a volume that may fall short for many users, but I insist that the sound quality is very good. Let's listen to a small test, although remember that it is not the same to listen to it live. So the sound hardware experience seems to me to be of very good quality, and regarding the software, note that there are also some options available, but it is curious that Honor reserves them for when you have the headphones connected. That is, there is no way to customize the audio emitted by the speakers, and that is something that should also improve with an update from my point of view. Also, remember that it does not have a headphone jack, so it is necessary to use Type-C headphones or an adapter. When you use headphones, the DTS-X Ultra sound effects options are enabled, and you can also enter some sound presets or specifically enter the Customize section, where you can select the stereo sound experience or also access some audio enhancements, where you can generally modify the treble, vocals or bass, or finally access a 10-band equalizer. But I repeat, this is only when you have headphones connected. And if you want to use wireless headphones, the good news is that it supports the aptX codec, which gives you a much higher resolution for wireless audio with compatible headphones. And they even offer support for the LDAC codec, which is of even higher quality, although I insist with compatible headphones, but you could enjoy good quality wireless audio. As for the microphones, we will only find two, and in this case it could fall short of what we would expect from a device of this price, which usually include 3 microphones or even more, but here it stays with the basics. Stereo pickup, let's test its quality.
Esta es una prueba de audio grabada con el Honor Magic V2, que además incluye en su aplicación una mejora de voz, donde la voz puede ser detectada de mejor calidad.
I don't think I got any surprises. In this case, it sounds very normal. Below you will see a video recorded with this device, setting the sound system in my living room at maximum volume to test how it does in those environments. In this case, it does not generate any distortion, so they are very good quality microphones, although we wish it had 3 microphones. This device has 2 front cameras, one on the external display and one on the internal display. However, they are cameras that have exactly the same quality and the same specifications, so we will find a 16 megapixel sensor and the lens has f2.2 aperture. With fixed focus, so we are talking about a simple front camera, although remember that in a foldable you can usually also take pictures with this photographic system, taking advantage of this screen as a viewfinder. In this case, we have no shortcut to quickly launch the camera with any gesture, so you must use the shortcut from the lock screen. Notice that it immediately enters portrait mode when you enable the front camera, so be careful in case you have the blur effect enabled because you might have unwanted results. And as you have just seen, it also has the gesture for the pictures with the palm of the hand. And in this case, we are going to have a very good capture speed. It shows us good agility. In the lower right corner, we will find 3 parameters for the beauty mode, and at the top we find a button for color filters. But if you want to use the main photo system to take a selfie, there are 2 ways. You could slide this camera rotate button up and it enables that new button, or it's also available at the top. So either one of those two buttons you can press, and then you can pull down the phone so that now you can take advantage of this screen as a viewfinder, and you're going to be able to use these cameras that are much higher quality. Although please switch to the main photography mode so that you can also take advantage of the ultra-wide camera and have a super wide capture. And in this case, it becomes indispensable the capture gesture with the palm of the hand, which as you realize will allow you to take the pictures in this case without having to press the shutter here. The front camera of this device is considerably wide, and that is possibly an attractive point because usually the front camera of the folding ones is much simpler. In this case at least has as a positive point the amplitude because the level of detail is not exaggeratedly high but enough for a good number of people. In this case it has fixed focus, so when you are a little closer to the camera I think you will have a better capture of details and textures, although it is still not so high. If you're too close to the camera, you'll appear out of focus. So with this wide lens, you could have a good enough group photograph with a group of up to 3 friends at about the same distance. But as I'll be telling you in many of these pictures, I think the best thing to do in a folding is to take advantage of the rear photographic system. So look at how wide the picture would be with the ultra-wide camera. So for group shots, it's an excellent tool. Just remind your friends to face the camera and not the screen, because it's a common mistake. Indoors, the front camera suffers a lot. Notice how when there is low light, it actually has a hard time defining details well. So it is a very simple camera in this aspect. Therefore, the best thing to do is to take pictures with the rear system and see the excellent quality that we have with this camera. We gain much more contrast and better detail definition as well as better color saturation. Even with the ultra-wide camera, we have the same quality of photography, but with much more space. So selfies, highly recommended that you take them with the rear photographic system. And at night, interestingly, with the front camera, it performed better than indoors, so I like the result. But again, if you take pictures with the rear camera system, you get a much more advanced quality in terms of texture and color. Even with the ultra-wide camera, which might have a little bit more suffering in these kind of low light conditions, especially in the darker areas, but you really still get good selfies. Although in backlit nights it does seem like you would want to take pictures with the front camera because it does detect your face and therefore tries to optimize it. Look at the result we have with the rear photo system. In this case, with the main camera at least, it seems not to have detected the face. Although with the ultra-wide camera, it was able to do this and therefore optimize the result a bit more. Even portrait photography with the front camera is good enough, but not as good as if you take a portrait with the rear system. So I insist, don't take selfies with the front camera, but better with the rear system, and they will be of an excellent result. And talking about the portrait pictures, notice that with the front camera, we don't have a good object detection, so it's a pretty simple portrait picture. So again, I will recommend you to take portrait pictures with the main system because the result will be much better, taking advantage of the fact that it is a foldable device and you can take selfies with these rear cameras. Last but not least, in backlight the preview still doesn't look optimized, so the whole light area is completely burned out. Interestingly, in my first test, the result was just as disastrous, with a completely burnt background. Although I then repeated the test and it improved quite a bit in the balance of highlights and shadows, but again, if you compare it to what the main camera could give you, you'll notice that it's not really that advanced a result. Notice that with the main camera, we have a better definition also of the shadow area, a very high level of detail, and a very good color saturation. And with the ultra-wide camera, you also have an excellent result. So this only confirms that the front camera will be much more focused on video calls or simple things, but for photography, better take advantage of the rear cameras. On the back, we will find a photographic system composed of 3 cameras. First, we will find the ultra-wide camera of 13mm with 50 megapixels on its sensor. In addition, f-aperture 2.0 and autofocus, so it will also work for macro shots. Then we find the 25mm camera, considered as the main camera. It has 50 megapixels on its sensor as well and has f1.9 aperture with autofocus and in this case optical stabilization. Finally, we have the 62mm camera that is optical zoom approximate 2.5x. It offers us 20 megapixels in its sensor, so it is a simpler than the previous two and offers us aperture f2.4 in the lens, so it does not have such an intense light input for night photographs, especially considering that it is not a lens that has too much optical zoom, and fortunately it does offer us autofocus and also optical stabilization. And as all accounts, it is a camera that has some level of delay like all smartphone cameras, but if you capture the pictures by looking through this viewfinder, you can perfectly get to capture the exact moment. In this case, I anticipated by a microfraction of a second, but you really have a good experience. It also integrates a burst, but it takes more than a second to start, so it does not serve to capture the exact moment. But you can extract a moment of all this time that allows you to capture, since it is a burst of 100 photographs that are more or less in 3 seconds. In fact, the device also has an automatic capture mode for movements such as jumps or pets, which without you pressing the shutter will automatically give you some pictures when it detects this type of specific movements. Also remember that it integrates artificial intelligence as the vast majority of devices today and has a special button where you can load the color filters that are available at the time of taking your pictures. If you tap on the screen, you can adjust the exposure or focus, but remember that you can access the professional mode where you can also modify other parameters such as the type of metering. The ISO can go up to 6400, the shutter speed can go up to 30 seconds, and we also have compensation, focus, and white balance, so that's several professional parameters, and raw photo capture is also available. Something I do not like is that QR codes is not able to detect them from the main camera interface, but you have to open Honor Lens with the button that is in the upper left corner, and through this tool you can do these actions. If you want to scan a document, you must enter the specific mode because it is not able to suggest you intelligently, but within this mode note that we have a considerably good scanner because it immediately detects the documents, and in fact it has an automatic shutter so that you do not even need to press the shutter, but immediately when it detects the document it will make the capture and trimming. And in this case, we are talking about a considerably advanced scanner, as it will be able to scan several sheets, so you can easily create a document with several pages and apply different optimization effects so that it does not simply look like a cropped photograph but looks like a professional scanner. In addition, this scanned document can be easily exported either directly to the Notes application or as a PDF. So it's a super advanced scanner, so you don't need to buy another app. And regarding the functions of a foldable device, remember that you could also take advantage of this feature of the device, as you could fold the device to work as a stand, and notice that the interface is going to adapt immediately. You have the viewfinder in the top half and the gallery in the bottom half, but you could also change the position of the viewfinder in case it suits better for the picture you want to capture, and all the controls are perfectly well placed. So it's another tool that the foldable device offers you that obviously you're not going to find in traditional format devices. This device features a high-resolution mode with which you can have more detailed photographs with virtually all cameras. Although the ultra-wide camera shows quite a weakness in this higher resolution mode, having very little level of detail and a very blurry effect in several areas of the photograph, so it is a simple ultra-wide camera if you get quite picky, as we can get in this price range. The 25mm camera with the high resolution mode is definitely going to feel higher quality with much more detail, although it is not free of some small distortions and chromatic aberration at the edges, but I think it is not as noticeable. And with the 62mm camera, i.e. 2.5x optical zoom, it also gives us a high resolution in this mode, so you can also get a good level of detail. Interestingly, if you don't use the high resolution mode, the ultra-wide camera improves its performance in terms of the areas that appear a bit out of focus, so I think the result is going to be much better if you shoot in automatic mode with this camera. Also, the colors and details look with a good quality. The main camera manages to maintain very similar color in several respects as the ultra-wide camera, but note that the red coloration does change and becomes a bit paler, so it seems that the color rendition is not as consistent across all three cameras, but it looks good anyway. The 62mm camera also has very similar color and offers good quality outdoors. Now you're looking at a 10x digital zoom picture, i.e. approximately 250mm. And you start to notice that this is not a specialist zoom device. In fact, it lets us go up to 40x, but in reality you don't really get to see such sharp detail, although I must say that it is superior to the zoom of the Galaxy Z Fold 5, but inferior to the zoom of the Oppo Find N3. So the maximum zoom looks too forced and is not so recommended, and in motion scenes I think it does a good job. In this case, the green disc is the one that was spinning at a very high speed, and I think it managed to keep the image well static. Also with the ultra-wide camera, it has a similar performance, although in this case some scenes could come out a little more blurred. In indoor photography, all cameras will give us a good performance, including the ultra-wide camera that sometimes comes out with little detail, but in this case I think it does have a very detailed image like what we find in the main camera and also the zoom camera, that in this case still the f2.4 aperture is enough to have a good light capture indoors and in backlit scenarios. Note that the preview still does not look very optimized, so the illuminated areas come out completely burned, but it has HDR, which is well applied with both the ultra-wide camera and the main camera, so we have a good performance in this type of backlit conditions, although specifically in this photo the focus seems to have suffered a slight distortion, but also the telephoto camera is going to offer us this level of balance of lights and shadows, so in this sense there is no drawback. The photograph meets a very good quality. Possibly the only improvement that could suggest is that the shadow area appears a little darker in this telephoto camera. At night, the ultra-wide camera can suffer a bit more than usual in the darkest areas. You will notice a bit of a strange feeling due to the noise reduction algorithm that could result in a picture that looks like watercolor, and the most illuminated area does not have a good exposure. If you use the night mode, improves a bit in this section, but not enough for us to consider that this device is an expert in this type of photographs. The main camera definitely has a better performance in this aspect. The most illuminated area is exposed correctly. The darkest area comes out practically without noise and still with a good definition, although if you use the night mode you are not going to notice practically any improvement with the zoom camera. We get a good result in this type of photographs, although the darkest areas possibly fall a little below what is expected in the price range, and if you use the night mode again there is not much improvement. Curiously, in the darkest areas with the automatic mode, we had a more attractive result than the one we had with the night mode, and with the main camera we have a very similar result in both cases with an imprecise color rendition. The zoom camera improves a lot in this section, curiously, because in theory it would be the camera that should suffer the most, although the photograph is a 5 megapixel camera, so the result is very good. 5 megapixels. So it is very curious how it tries to combine all the pixels to generate a picture with more light but not necessarily more detail. In fact, with the night mode, you also gain a little more definition, but the photo is still 5 megapixels. But to talk about a night photograph with zoom and a folding, I think the result is attractive. For macro photography, we will have good results. This is the closest you can be using the 25mm camera, which is the main camera, but you can apply a little zoom on this camera and still notice an excellent level of detail. In fact, with the ultra-wide camera, you can use a kind of macro mode that observes that it will give us an excellent level of detail as well, and even being closer. And if you apply a little zoom inside the macro mode, you could have this kind of results. So I think if it is a versatile camera in this sense. With the ultra-wide camera, you have very good width and very good space, but if it seems insufficient or you want to try to eliminate chromatic aberration, you can use the panoramic mode, which in this case improves because it will give us the photograph with the main camera, although we would also like to allow panoramic photography with the ultra-wide camera. And it seems to me that the dynamic range is a little beyond the account because the shadow area is slightly lighter than we would like to observe the difference in the ultra-wide camera. We have a little more marked shadows with more realism, and in the panoramic photo looks a little more artificial photo. Finally, the portrait photography seems to me of a good quality, even the hair that can be a little complicated. I think it detects it in a good way. Also, the objects that are in the foreground detects them well to blur the background. Also allows us to take portrait photography with a 2x zoom, applying a crop on the sensor, so it does not seem to have a level of detail as high as we would love, but the result still looks attractive. However, the best portrait from my point of view will be with the 62mm lens 2.5x zoom. And we have again a good quality. I don't consider myself an expert in portrait photography, but the result I think is attractive, considering, for example, that this was a moving portrait, which is a super complex situation, although there are some areas that it didn't detect as accurately, but the result I still think it is redeemable. What I like the most is that you can take pictures with the aperture effect and see how it generates a nice bokeh effect, although the edges are not detected as accurately, so the foreground edges might look a little cloudy, but in reality portrait photographs of objects will also give us a very good image quality. Video recording is a bit curious in this device because the ultra-wide camera and the main camera can record in 4 to 60 frames per second, but the telephoto camera can only do it in full HD at 60 frames per second, while the front camera cannot record at 60 frames per second, but only in 4 to 30 frames. So unlike other high-end devices where all cameras have the same capabilities, in this case, the video recording will have different resolutions for each camera. Interestingly, it has a night recording mode that you can enable on this button, and you can also use the color filters while recording videos, although the resolution is downgraded to full HD when you use one of these filters. Also, facial beauty options are available with a single slider, but again, it's not possible using these beauty effects recording in 4K. When you start your video recording, we are going to be able to take pictures, also pause and resume recording, and it also has quick shortcuts to manipulate the zoom, plus this ring with which you can move more comfortably. What it can't do is rotate to the front camera, something that I think it should be available, but if it allows you to turn on the flashlight while you're recording, however, something I definitely do not like several Honor devices is that when you record in 4K, you have a limit of 15 minutes, something that practically does not happen in other smartphones, and obviously that in the video also the interface will adapt as I was telling you in the picture. And in fact, remember that in this case, you could also enable the viewfinder on the back so that the people you are recording a video for can see how they are coming out, although always remember to make them look towards the camera and not towards the screen because it could bring a strange result. Note that a movie mode is also available where the device will have the ability to record even in a log format that you can colorize in post-production in a very advanced way. Or you can also select some loots that comes preloaded with different color interpretations, although you cannot load your own loots, but it is considerably advanced recording, although in this mode does not offer some manual parameters, but you can enter the professional mode and switch to video mode, and in this case you will have all the manual parameters plus the log and loot recording available here as well. Remember that this device can record in 4K at 60 frames per second, but only with the main camera and the ultra-wide camera, as the zoom camera is not even capable of recording video in 4, almost not just full HD. So even though the ultra-wide camera and the main camera record in good quality, definitely the telephoto camera falls well below what one would expect in a device in this price range and does not have the ability to record in 4K. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera also looks a bit weak with respect to light capture, so it generates much more noise compared to the result we had in the photograph. The main camera will be the best in this case. But curiously, there is also presence of noise, so it seems to struggle a bit, managing the noise that in this case looks more like grainy, and not so much as noise, but in the darkest areas, it is very noticeable. And finally, the zoom camera will not have a good performance in this type of scenarios, and consider that the white balance changes very abruptly between the main camera and the zoom camera, giving a very strange result. With the ultra-wide camera, we have a good balance of lights and shadows recording in these conditions, although the light changes are perceived a bit abruptly, but it is not something that is too strange with the ultra-wide camera. The zoom camera giving a slightly strange result. With the ultra-wide camera, we have a good balance of lights and shadows recording in these conditions. Although if you get to perceive a little abrupt changes in light, but it is not really serious, the main camera also has a good behavior in this type of complex scenarios, although again it is perceived a little abrupt, but it is not something really serious. The main camera also has a good performance in this type of complex scenarios, although again you can perceive a bit of grain in the darkest areas will be accentuated, especially if you zoom, because it considers that if you are recording in 4K will not make the effect as I anticipated a moment ago. Also, zooming seems to have less balance of lights and shadows, and at night the camera has a good performance in this type of complex scenarios. Shadows, and at night the ultra-wide camera again has some problems with noise and grain, does not get to balance well the brightest areas, and in the darkest areas presents an acceptable quality, but for the price ranges below what one would expect, this obviously referring to traditional non-folding devices, the main camera has an interpretation of colors a little warmer, but obviously handles better in situations with very low light, although it is still not able to expose well the brightest areas. And with respect to the zoom camera, I remind you that it does not record in 4K, also does not have a good balance of light and shadow in this section, although when you go to the darkest areas has an acceptable quality, but for the price range is below what one would expect. This obviously referring to traditional devices, not foldable, able to expose in a good way the most illuminated areas. And with respect to the zoom camera, I remind you that it does not record in 4K, also does not have a good balance of lights and shadows in this section, although when you go to the darkest areas without having any light source, note that it will automatically make the switch to the main camera. In fact, it becomes immediately noticeable in order to receive a little more light, as the f2.4 aperture is insufficient in such dark scenes. Regarding the stabilization, even recording in 4K with the ultra-wide camera, we have a good performance both when walking and running, although curiously it was reduced to 26 frames per second, and with the main camera, curiously it was recorded at 24 frames per second. I do not know if due to heating or what reason, but the stabilization specifically goes well, although the effect of 26 frames per second is noticeable, and the telephoto camera definitely does not perform well in this regard, so the telephoto is the worst when recording video. In this case, it incorporates a recording mode with the blur applied in the background, although it is at 24 frames per second with full HD resolution to give a cinematic touch supposedly, but note that the result is not so advanced, looks poorly defined, although if you do not have too much movement, if you could give an aesthetic of a more advanced lens, but in this case you will notice that does not change the intensity of the blur depending on the distance. And finally also considers that the objects does not keep them in focus, so it is a recording mode of portrait effect, quite simple. The device also includes a fast motion mode that goes at a bit low bit rate, so if you pause it at some point you will notice that it doesn't look as detailed. The video also has an automatic speed setting, so you can't choose how fast you want it to go, and it might be too fast for people movements, although for landscapes, if you leave it for a long time recording, it might give you an attractive result. The good news is that the fast motion if on 4, unlike other devices, so it's fine. And regarding the slow motion, it can be in full HD at 240 frames per second, this as the slowest possible setting, although it can also go to 120 frames per second. In general, we could say that it is a camera that has a good behavior regarding the focus. You will not notice that the device is refocusing very aggressively constantly when there are faces present, although it could be a difficult task to focus some objects in this type of scenarios where there is a lot of light in the back. The ultra-wide camera can also reach these scenarios, so that could also be improved. The front camera offers us a recording in 4K with what meets a good quality, also has good stabilization and good level of detail, although the colors are not as intense or contrast as high as with the main camera. Also, the dynamic range is low, so the most illuminated areas will be burned again as in photography. It is recommended to record with the rear system because it has no autofocus, then observe the difference recording with the rear system. In this case, with the ultra-wide camera gives the feeling of being recording with an action camera, although the view must be directed towards the camera. Because if you direct it towards the screen will leave a result a little strange, but observe how the recording rises a lot of level. Doing this, for example, backlighting leaves a shot excellently balanced in terms of lights and shadows, also maintains a good stabilization, and if you record with the main camera, you can have a dynamic range a little more extreme, although the framing is quite close due to the stabilization. So it is advisable to use the ultra-wide camera to have a better framing indoors will be much more noticeable. This difference that I'm telling you, observe how with the front camera there is a lot of noise present, little definition and little color saturation, but if you record with the main camera, the colors gain much more saturation, more contrast is gained, even though there is still some noise present, but it is a much better video quality. And if you record with the ultra-wide camera, you have much more amplitude. Then I repeat, it is highly recommended to record with the rear system. At night, we will reconfirm this. Observe that there is much more noise and grain present in the face in these conditions, even with artificial light directed towards your face. Then the most advisable is to record with the main camera and observe the great definition that we have, gain much more detail with the main camera, even directing you to the darkest areas. I think we have a good result, and the ultra-wide camera does not have so much light input, so in this case behaves very similar to what we saw with the front camera when we are in this type of night scenes. So at night it is more advisable to record only with the main camera. Also, when you are in the darkest areas, does not allow to turn on the flashlight as to improve the capture, so that could perhaps improve. For the front camera, we will not find a fast camera mode, nor can we deploy the device to use the rear photographic system. The same will happen with the slow motion. So here there are several points of improvement where it is noted that Honor still has not so optimized software, also cannot use the portrait mode or with the front or with the rear in selfie mode, but is integrated into the dual recording mode. This in full HD with a slightly wider format to 30 frames per second. Fortunately, it does let you zoom, although it doesn't dynamically switch to the zoom camera nor to the ultra-wide camera, but the performance seems to be good. It keeps the focus enabled, and besides this split screen mode, you can have a picture-in-picture mode where you can move the frame to the area you want, although you can't resize it, but the performance seems okay to record blogs or a story showing both sides with a performance similar to the one I told you a moment ago. This device at its launch came with Android 13, but fortunately has already received its update to Android 14 with macOS 8.0, so it has the latest software both Honor and Google, and also offer us 4 years of software updates, but already passed the first year because I insist, as I told you at the beginning of the video, the device came outdated to the global market, so practically reduced by 1 year. Its support also offers us 5 years of security patches, so I think it has what it takes to compete in a good way. Although it is not the highest in the industry, let me tell you some additional features that brings. For example, we will find a customization for the screen customization, so we will find a customization for the screen of the device. Also offers 5 years of security patches, so I think it has what it takes to compete in a good way, although it is not the highest in the industry. Let me tell you some additional features that brings. For example, we will find a customization for the lock screen, so we will find different types of covers that we can select. For example, this one where the magazine style customization appears, and in fact, you can choose the image that you want to put in this part, and you can also choose the image that you want to put in this part, and you can also choose the image that you want to put in this part. You want to put in this part, and you can also choose the style of the decoration, so the customization of the lock screen seems to me to be one of the strongest points of this device that will make it look very attractive. And from the lock screen, you can change only the background, but you cannot change the whole style completely, because notice that the clock still looks very similar, so you must enter the settings if you want to change the style completely, and it comes with a good level of customization. You will find a section of basic themes where you can customize some areas of the system. Also remember that integrates always on display to have some cover of some image or some analog or digital clocks, and is also available a store where you can buy more always on display covers, although the server is quite slow, so you have to be very patient to explore the content. It also includes a function that has a completely strange name. The function is called on hold when you pass. The mouse does not make any sense, this name, but let me explain what it is. When you have enabled this feature, note that if you have the device in a semi-folded format, will show the clock and calendar just so you can take a look, and serves the fact of being a folding device. However, does not allow customization of this panel or anything, so it is a bit simple so far, but hopefully with a future update will allow more customization, and above all, correct the name that makes no sense. You can also select how you want it to be with the internal screen, which I think is very good. So in the same way you have the icons arranged on the external screen, they will also appear on the internal screen, although you could also disable this if you want to have different layouts. It also has a kind of smart folder that will give you suggestions with artificial intelligence based on your usage patterns. So if at about 10:30 in the morning you open some app, the shortcut will appear here, which can be very useful. Also remember that in your pictures inside the gallery, you can also press and hold to select the text easily, and in this case, the one-hand use mode works well, reducing the vertical and horizontal spacing. It also has some gestures, for example, to access the voice assistant by holding down the power button, or you can also tell it if you want to activate the flashlight by double pressing the volume down button when the screen is locked. You can also take screenshots by tapping twice with the knuckle, or you could also select that with 3 fingers down you do the same action. However, by default it is selected that with 3 fingers down you can save in your notes some web pages although the first time you use it will ask for many permissions, and this is something that bothers me personally because it is a system function and should already come configured, but instead manually you have to be enabling some permissions, so it can be a bit complex for users who do not have enough experience. But after all the configuration, see how within our notes application will be saved web pages that we have selected to read later, even if we do not have connection. If you tap the screen with 2 knuckles, you can start the screen recording, so you can show some tutorial or something similar, but remember that this recording has an extremely low resolution, lower than HD, so it is unacceptable quality screen recording. Also note that it has the multi-window dock available, where you can run some apps in a floating window mode, although remember you will only be able to open 1 app at a time in this format, so you don't have as much productivity. The rest of the apps will be minimized in this sidebar, but it definitely doesn't give you as much versatility as you might find on other devices. If you have the screen spread out, if you're going to be able to open up to 2 apps in this format, then you don't have as much productivity. You will be able to open up to 2 applications in this floating window format, so you gain a little more productivity, but it still gives the impression of being a much more limited experience compared to the multitasking you could achieve with other devices. Although if you combine the floating screen with the split screen, you could have more versatility. So for example, when you open any application like Facebook, a small bar will appear at the top that you can press to enable the split screen option. Then you can open any other application you want, and in this case we could have opened up to 4 applications at the same time, so you can take advantage of a little more space. However, in terms of productivity, I think it could also improve the experience if we offered a taskbar at the bottom with shortcuts to applications that we have seen in other foldable, but in this case is not yet available, only on the home screen. We will see this dock with quick shortcuts to applications that you have determined and 3 elements of recent applications with what you could quickly return to some application, but definitely the best experience would be to have a taskbar. The device also integrates a feature called Call Privacy by Artificial Intelligence that honestly I do not find the sense of artificial intelligence. The only thing it will do will be to detect when you lower the volume of the phone. Will detect when you lower the volume quickly, when you receive a call to put an even quieter mode, and only you can hear that call, and those around you, not supposedly artificial intelligence, detect the noise that may be in your environment to adapt the volume of this call. This device also brings support for a pencil, but it is not distributed in Mexico. This accessory that would come in handy, but you will not be able to use it unless you buy it separately from a store in China. The device also includes the smart control application, so you can use this cell phone as a universal remote control by configuring the type of device and its brand. And also includes a section of folding phones where you can configure the behavior that has this device when you have the screen deployed and then close the phone. In this case, by default, brings a behavior for the screen to stay on when making this transition. But you can also select if you want this screen to turn off directly. I would like to bring another option like the Oppo Find N3 that when you close the device gives you the option to make a gesture to turn the screen back on in case you wanted to continue using the phone, but in this case is completely blocked and must be unlocked. You can also configure the behavior of the applications if you want to see them in full screen or in a slightly smaller format depending on the style they have. Although there are some applications and especially games that do not get to adapt well. We will see a little later also includes an option that optimizes the space of applications, but at this time there is no application compatible, so that's curious. And finally has an option to extend the applications and take advantage of more space. For example, in this case X is the only compatible application. Then note that if you are browsing in this application and want to open, for example, a profile will open as a separate window, so you can continue to have 2 views, which is quite good. But as I say, few applications are compatible. In this case, X is the only compatible application. Then note that if you are browsing in this application and want to open, for example, a profile will open as a separate window, so you can continue to have 2 views, which is quite good. But as I tell you, few applications are compatible at this time. And finally, there is an option called floating mode that honestly I have not managed to understand what is its operation. The gallery also comes adapted so that in case of folding, the device is enabled another style of view and you can have control at the bottom, but there are not too many applications adapted for this format. For example, the calendar does not have any kind of change when you use the folding format. The calculator will not adapt its view. So it seems that the system still has many areas to improve and take better advantage of the folding style. Evidently, being a high-end device, has an optical drive on the X-axis for the vibration response is premium in that sense, does not disappoint. Oh, and it also has a feature called Magic Portal, which remember that it will allow us to drag quite a lot of content to this sidebar. For example, if someone sends you a location through a message, you can simply drag it directly to Google Maps and it will immediately start the navigation. So it saves you several steps, so you simply have to click that you want to go. Instead of having to copy the text, then open the app, paste the text, and finally start the search. Then it saves you several steps. Although Honor claims it has a lot of artificial intelligence behind it, but it seems to me that it could still be refined. Because, for example, if I drag a message that contains an event that they could clearly recognize with artificial intelligence, it gives me the suggestion to use the calendar, then it could still be improved. It gives me some suggestions of apps that can receive this text, but they are not going to perform some advanced action, although it does make it easier for you several things. For example, if you want to upload a video simply from the gallery, you can drag it to YouTube or Facebook and in a simple way upload some short videos, even TikTok drills reels or normal Instagram posting, then we have this kind of good abilities when dragging a video, and also when dragging a picture. You could send it directly to some WhatsApp contact or Telegram, or even do an image-based search through Google, so the Magic Portal gives you good options. But it seems to me that it could be improved even more. Let's talk about security. This device has a capacitive side fingerprint reader that works quite well. The unlocking is practically instantaneous, so it is very good in this case. Will support up to 5 different records, and you can select if you simply must rest your finger on top or you need to press the button to perform the unlocking. In addition to that, accounts with facial recognition. But unlike other high-end Honor devices, in this case is only in 2 dimensions, so it is not as secure as the Honor Magic 5 Pro. Some people will use it for convenience to avoid having to be placing your fingerprint every moment, but you could also use it to unlock the phone. Unlike other high-end Honor devices, in this case, it is only in 2 dimensions, so it is not as secure as the Honor Magic 5 Pro. Some people will use it for convenience, so they don't have to be placing their fingerprint every time, but you could also use the Smart Unlock for convenience, which is the Google Unlock, so you can select some trusted places like your home or some other areas, or also trusted devices like Google Unlock, so you can select some trusted places like your home or some other areas, or also trusted devices like the Honor Magic 5 Pro, so you can select some trusted places like your home or some other areas, or also trusted devices like the Honor Magic 5 Pro. Other areas, or also trusted devices like your watch or headphones, so that while you are in those environments, is not asking you every moment your fingerprint, your pattern, or your PIN. This device includes a password manager on Honor, so it does not depend on Google in this regard. And if it is synchronized in the cloud, if you enable this option, then I think it is a manager considerably good, although it is disabled from factory, but you can enable it to automatically fill in the passwords in the forms, verifying first through your fingerprint that it is indeed you who is filling in this information. Although for some reason it takes a long time to activate the first time, but after that you can perfectly log in different applications, verifying simply through your fingerprint. It also includes the app lock option, so you can choose which apps should re-request a code that can be different from your lock screen, and you can select if you want it to work with your fingerprint and your face also. In addition, it also includes the safe where you can store your files also securely, and it also includes a parallel space option where we will have another cell phone inside this cell phone. Notice how the second space comes with its own apps and its own files. So it is a completely private space also that you can access with your fingerprint. Definitely that we find good security and privacy options, although it does not include a child mode, nor does it include a private VPN. And in the case of malware scanning within the System Manager application, you will notice that it does have an option in collaboration with a company called TrustLock. Although it is not too world renowned, if you get to lose your device, you depend on Google to find it, so it does not have its own implementation of the system, and also has the options of Google Digital Wellness, where you can analyze the behavior. You have time in certain applications, set a time to go to sleep, and different situations, in addition to managing your children's devices with parental control options as long as they are Android. And finally, remember that there are also the emergency options, so you can fill in some emergency contact information, and pressing 5 times the on-off button, you can start one of these calls. The battery is 5000 milliamps, and I must tell you that it is simply spectacular. Normally, foldable devices have smaller batteries for space issues, but in this case, they use a very innovative battery that, despite being ultra thin, reaches a capacity of 5000 milliamps. But not only is a battery with a good capacity, but putting the test also confirms that it is excellent. In fact, this device yielded much more than what other traditional devices yield with. It is not only a thinner battery that retains the same capacity, but even gives you a superior autonomy. Is completely spectacular. So, running this battery drainer in this format folded gave me more than 5 hours, something that I insist is completely remarkable, and having the device deployed with this same drainer came to 3 hours with 36 minutes. Considering that the screen space is much larger, is also a very good figure. On the other hand, watching YouTube videos in the foreground while the drainer was still running in the background, we realized that this device manages to manage the energy of applications running in the background in a spectacular way. In the deployed format, reached 8 hours with 36 minutes, something that is completely good. And even in the folded format came to over 10 hours and a half again. And a half hours again, confirming that the battery is easily one of the strongest points of this device, not only within its folding competition that usually have reduced battery life, but also within traditional smartphones, which is very worthy of being admired, because I repeat that we are talking about an ultra thin battery. With this tremendous battery, I don't think you will need the power saving mode, but it is available, although it doesn't have a super saver mode for emergency situations. But honestly, the battery is very good, so I don't think it is something you will use very often, or you will miss the charger included with this device is 66 watts. In this case, I have a UK charger because it is a review unit, but obviously the charger will come adapted to your region, and honestly, it is very good. So I don't think it is something you will use very often, or you will miss the charger included with this device is 66 watts. In this case, I have a UK charger because it is a review unit, but obviously the charger will come adapted to your region, and honestly, it is very good. It is honestly a good charge, although it is not ultra spectacular as we could find maybe in other traditional format devices, but we must remember that this device is using a new high density technology in the battery to be able to put a very thin battery in a device of these characteristics. So the drawback that we could find to the battery would be that the charge is not going to be so fast, although it is not disappointing. In my test with 15 minutes of charging, it got up to 27%. With 30 minutes of charging, it got up to 55%, and the full charge finished in 67 minutes. So it is not bad at all. Although I repeat that it is not the fastest in the industry, but if you consider the battery life with the power of the load and consider that it is a folding device, definitely that the experience is very good. Although it has no wireless charging, and that definitely plays against him if you compare it with the folding from Samsung, but it is another sacrifice they make in exchange for offering you a very thin device, but it does not give you the premium experience that one would expect from a device of this price, much less. It is going to offer you reversible wireless charging, although at least it does give you smart charging. So if you leave your cell phone charging all night, it will charge much slower from 80% in order to not deteriorate the battery, and it will learn your routine so that when you wake up, the device will finally have charged to 100%. It also has a smart battery capacity option that will make the device not really use 100% of the battery, but a little less, this to prevent the battery from degrading so fast. So consider that even with this feature enabled, you have a good autonomy. If you disable it, you can probably get to extend even more the life of your battery, but you will also increase the rate of degradation. So it is recommended that you leave these options enabled, and overall the battery experience is good, although it is expected that in future versions can improve integrating wireless charging. In connectivity, we will not have any complaints. This device supports 5G network, so you can have the maximum possible connectivity. And in the case of the second SIM, you could also add A and SIM, so that simply scanning a QR code, you can add a data plan, for example, when traveling can become too useful to not have to go to buy a card without physical. Also, in the data usage section, note that you can select which applications can access the internet using your mobile data plan and which applications can only do it by Wi-Fi. In fact, you could also select which applications can use roaming. Then it can become very useful both at the same place to select very well which applications can consume your plan. Also includes support for Wi-Fi 7. Therefore, also have good download speed and has Bluetooth 5.3 to offer us good stability with accessories. Also has NFC to make mobile payments. So through Google Wallet or Google Pay, you can make this type of connections, and also you can connect to headphones or some other accessories through NFC. So it is very convenient. What it does not have is FM radio, but no device in the range brings it. And regarding the screen projection, you can do it wirelessly and by cable, and also it is an advanced projection. So besides mirror type with the possibility to hide notifications and other things, you can make a projection type desktop, i.e. on the big screen will look like a windowed format, and if you connect a keyboard and a wireless mouse can gain much more productivity. Obviously also has Android Auto, and the USB port is 3.1 Gen 1, offering good transfer speed. And in the sensors, it brings everything we would expect from a high-end device, including also a physical proximity sensor for excellent performance. The Honor ecosystem is one of the most complete of today, has a good number of devices, although possibly in the wearables is a little short. Talking about watches, although it has a good variety of bracelets, and in this case has a good level of interaction between wearable devices and the cell phone, although not as advanced as we could find in Apple or Samsung, but the most advanced interaction is found in their laptops. Interaction is found in their laptops, as you also have the option to use your cell phone directly from the laptop, so the ecosystem is very good in this section. And if you do not have a laptop, Honor also includes connectivity to Windows installed to make it a little easier. But if you have a laptop, Honor connectivity will be much simpler. Then it has good technologies such as Honor Connect also, so that everyone can use your cell phone directly from the laptop. Technology such as Honor Connect also, so that all devices of this same brand can work in a very well integrated way, also brings Honor Share, so you can share your files very easily between cell phones of this same brand or their computers. And being part of the Android ecosystem also has Quick Share or Google Fast Pair to link you to others' accessories, then comes with a very good ecosystem, although it is noted that still Honor is not completely independent of any other manufacturer, because for example for cloud storage depend on Google Drive and does not have any application to control home devices, or something similar in that sense, also depend on Google Home that certainly does not come factory installed. Let's go to the performance test. Includes the Snapdragon processor 8 Gen 2, so it is a high-end processor but not the latest generation, and that could affect the performance compared to other high-end devices today. But either way is a very good processor, and if well accompanied by RAM, as a result will give us a fairly high performance. In this case, it took 2.6 seconds more or less in opening each application, showing a good power, but it is not the most powerful of the market. As I say, the processor is not the latest generation, but if it is a flagship processor completely, then you yourself are seeing that has a good performance, and especially in conjunction with this amount of RAM will also allow the device can keep multiple applications open at the same time. In fact, still has another 7 gigabytes of virtual RAM, which in the case of Honor, I have tested it and it serves very well. Although in this case with 16 gigabytes of physical RAM, I don't think the virtual RAM is necessary, but either way you are seeing that I have the ability to keep 16 applications open without any kind of problem. All of them seem to keep running. Just this animation of the recent app screen seems to be not. So optimized at times they disappear, but that's a little bit of an issue. Moments disappear, but that is a small detail that probably can be corrected with an update in the rest of things. This device has a perfect performance. Also remember that includes at last and then gigabytes of internal storage, so you have plenty of space, although it is not possible to place a micro SD to expand it, but with the internal capacity it has, I think it is enough for a huge number of users. Then let's see how long it takes to export a video that adds 4 videos recorded in 4K with this device with a total duration of 1 minute, and it took only 18 seconds, showing us that it is an extremely fast device despite not having a latest generation processor together with a good speed storage and also a very good speed RAM memory. Then we prove that it is a completely flagship device with a very high performance. Finally, for the games, we have to show a small curious detail that within the application settings, we will find the game manager for some reason does not come the shortcut on the main screen by default, and in this section you can select which games will have these additional tools. Also, you can select if you want the games to install their updates automatically, and finally you can enable or disable this additional panel. Then when entering a game, notice that immediately the performance optimizations are loaded, so we can slide from the side to access this manager. In this part you can select the type of performance you want or disable this additional panel. Then when you enter a game, notice that immediately the performance optimizations are loaded, so we can slide from the side to access this manager. In this part, you can select the type of performance you want to have, if you want a balanced profile or a profile of maximum performance, and also has a slider for brightness, a do not disturb mode, and prevention of accidental touches. It also brings some filters for the color rendering to change, especially very useful to have more visualization in the shadows in games, a little darker, and has tools to capture the screen in image. And video, finally, you can open some applications in a floating mode to answer messages without leaving your game or something similar, but it seems that still has functions a little limited, especially if we compare it with other devices in Call of Duty. By default, this device gives us the very high quality at maximum frames per second rate. And note that ultra frames per second rate is also available, although the graphic quality drops to a medium level. Then by selecting the very high graphic quality setting, note that if all the effects are available, in fact we can use all of them at the same time. And also in the experimental functions, we can enable several more options to enable more effects. Experimental, we can enable several more options to improve our experience. However, if you give priority to the frames per second, evidently some filters will be disabled in the special effects. Although here it is also noted that the device does not have a newer generation processor, because other devices today with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, if they allow the maximum graphics quality with a maximum frame rate, then if you are the most demanding with respect to the ultra detailed gaming with all possible effects and more, you will resent this section. But if not in this configuration of maximum rate, we will also have a very good experience of 60 frames per second, virtually stable, so there is nothing to reproach in this regard unless you want to have the latest graphics technologies in the processor. We also tested it with the ultra rate, and in this case, if you get to notice also the maximum graphics quality with a maximum frame rate case. If you get to also notice the 90 frames per second, and simply with an additional comment, remember that the prevention of accidental touches has to be activated manually, unlike other devices that enable it automatically. So you might have some inconvenience at times making gestures on the screen, but the system is perfectly fine, has very good stability, although the heating, if it came to even from the last test approaching 45 degrees Celsius from this game that usually does not get to have so much heating, this could have a simple explanation, and that is that in a folding the components are much more compressed, so surely has little space to cool, and that could play against you if you want to use this device to play, especially if the area where you live is very hot. In the Legends game, we had to change the auto setting to ultra graphics detail at 60 frames per second, and again the performance was very good. There is nothing to complain about. In fact, curiously, for the type of material that integrates in the hand, does not get to feel so hot. Although measuring it through the thermometer again came to get very close to 50 degrees Celsius, then the performance is very good, but the heating, if it can become a little high, and obviously in very long games, the heating can get to play very against you. In the case of SpongeBob, we tried to play with the device deployed, and in this game, the truth is that the experience was quite disastrous, especially because if we have run it in other foldable where the screen fits perfectly, but this time the image looked extremely stretched, so definitely still missing some optimization on this device at the software level to take advantage of the fact of being a foldable. Plus, the touches were not well recognized when trying to play, so we were with an experience honestly very bad. Although obviously this is an issue with this game specifically, it is not something that happens with all games, but unfortunately that was the experience we have had, so we had to open and close the game several times to finally get it to run, and even then the experience had several fluctuations. It is not a game you are going to be able to enjoy. In fact, it doesn't even look with good quality graphics. It looks overly plain, and it also got to over a degree Celsius, so this was the worst game in this game, so it was the worst game in this game. This was the worst game on this device. And lastly, on Henshin Impact, by default it gives us the medium quality at a rate of a few frames per second, but for the test we turned it up to the highest possible as it is an ultra expensive device, so we set it to very high quality at 60 frames per second with very high motion blurring. And this being one of the heaviest games we tested, it heated the device in an exaggeratedly high way, practically reached 50 degrees Celsius, which is definitely a dangerous area for a device that is being used with battery, so it is not advisable to play too heavy content, not because the heating that can be generated, although we play on a slightly warm day so it could affect it a little, but it is definitely not advisable to play content so heavy that come to demand more to the processor, especially because we will notice that after a time of execution of this content was limited to 45 frames per second because it was no longer able to reach 60 due to heating, so definitely heating itself can become something very important, although it is a very focused heating in the area where the processor is the rest of the body of the device does not get to feel so hot, which we can get to confirm somehow that being a folding device where the components are very crowded, heat dissipation does not become a positive point. And ready as a conclusion, it is a foldable device that has as its strongest points its slim and very light design, because if you were attracted by the folding devices by the fact of offering a larger screen but delimited the fact that they were very thick or very cumbersome, definitely this device will meet your expectations. However, at the software level could still improve the camera. Zoom camera is also not as attractive as it should be in this price range, but the battery also comes to greatly enhance the experience, being even superior to traditional devices, so it could prove to be a very useful tool to work for many people. For the moment, this has been all for this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can indicate it, and see you next time.